using this screw and this vise jaw that I bought together to make a vise for my son's bench. To make that happen, big thing I wanted to do right now is get a plan for mounting this vise chop onto the leg. Now my thinking is I want to have the bench top with a mortise in it and a tenon cut on the top of this leg. Because this leg is going to face the outside of the bench, I want to make this tenon cross in this direction. And for that to happen, I want to have just a notch cut out of one side of this, because the 2x4 that is the outer edge of the bench is going to lock this leg in place. And this vise will be trying to pull this leg through that outside 2x4 so that the outside 2x4 becomes part of the clamping operation. To make that happen, I need to understand how long this leg needs to be. To help in that process, this back leg has the tenon marked out on it, is going to be at 90 degrees to this leg. So I have this tenon going this direction, locking this leg into the top of the bench, and this leg will have the tenon going this direction, so that when the top expands and contracts, it'll be anchored on this side, and this side can float. Now you'd think, well, that'll make it so the bench is a little weaker. Actually, by the time you put the framing in there, the base is going to be solid all on its own, because it'll have mortise and tenon cross pieces. I'm going to use 2x4 half laps to come through this face here and approximately here, so that I have the legs braced. And the top will be able to float, the clamp will be able to draw that 2x4 up solidly, and it should give us a good anchor point. So, like most of my projects, I'm just going to start carving on a piece of wood. By cutting out this chunk of wood, I'm going to create a tenon that's about 1 3/4 inches high and 2 inches thick. That's going to lock this leg behind the outer 2x4 of the top. Should give it a good solid anchor. I'll also have about 1 inch of material on top of the tenon so that the bench will not be sitting on the tenon itself, I like to have that the bench top be a solid piece with as few dings and dents in it as I can get away with. So that's the idea of that. Because I want to have this face be the outer face of the leg. It's a little cleaner and a little better shape. I'm going to cut a face lap tenon across this part of the leg. And I want to have that tie in so that the top of this tenon has the bench top sitting on it. So the cross tenon is going to be the width of a 2x4. Across that leg. At the same time, I'm going to have it similar, cut across the other leg so that the faces of the leg come out flush. And this side will be over here. These two boards will be on the same plane, and the extra part of the wider leg will go towards the center of the table. That way I can have this 2x4 cross piece square with the outer part of the table. Using direct measurement, that way I don't have to worry about transposing any numbers or getting things goofed up because of perspective. I know that if I cut the mortise in this wide, it's going to fit that 2x4. Once again, using direct measurement. That's how deep the mortise into the leg needs to be. I'm just using the square to make sure I have the lines even. Mark the part that I'm going to cut out. Do the same on the other side. Transfer the lines around so that they wrap. And there we have it. Now I could use a fancy miter box and a tenon saw and all kinds of things to make this spiffy. And Lord knows I like to use my tools. This is a workbench. The idea is strong and sturdy. I do want to have good solid joints. Walking my way around that 4x6. I end up with a nice square cut. Straight this way, straight that way. If I were to try and cut it from one corner to the other, straight through, it's going to give it a tendency to wander. Even this wide saw plate, because of the set, the saw plate's a little thinner than what the kerf is, and you can tend to curve. But by walking it around, you counteract that curve by making it a small increment in each place. I'm going to set the bottom cross beam at 6 inches up off the floor. No particular reason other than it seems like a good place to be. quite often I find that symmetry is in the eye of the beholder. And if I put it at 7 inches, some people would like it better, some people would like it less. But 6 inches works for me, and since I'm the guy doing the work, I get to choose. One small proviso. You always want to make sure that you put the marks on the same side of the board where the board goes. I know it sounds simple, but this is a mistake that I have made in the past, and I'm sure others will make it in the future. Once again, I'm going to use the board that I'm using for the cross member as the marker, because this way I know that when I cut the hole, it will be the right width. Well, I don't absolutely know that for a fact, but I got a lot better shot at it if I use this rather than making a guesswork at what size the thing is. The other thing you have to be sure of when you're working with 2x4s, 2x4s are not created equal. Depending upon the time of year, the weather conditions, actually it's raining outside right now, and a variety of other factors, the two-by-four can be different sizes. Humidity causes them to swell and get bigger. Dry air causes them to shrink, and they shrink and swell in one direction. Odd to think that the board would shrink in just one direction, but that's just how it goes. Kind of fascinating, the direction that they shrink in is just because we make them into square boards doesn't mean that it's always going to be a board that's square with the way that the tree grew. Notch, mark, good. Cut here, cut here, cut there. Not a requirement. But then again, I'm working with me, and I recognize that I make mistakes. I try and avoid them, but they just seem to crop up no matter what I do. So anything I can do to make it more difficult to make a mistake improves my odds of making it right. I make a mistake with a pencil, it's usually nowhere near as much trouble when I make a mistake with a saw or chisel. Okay, notch on the same side, that's good. X marks the spot where I cut. One other thing about using scrap wood, you'll end up with lots of spare lines on the board. Why is that? Well, because somebody else had an idea, or you had an idea, to use the board for something else. If you can, remove the line. Just gets rid of that temptation to try and follow it. If you can't, make sure that you identify what is happening with that line. Okay, next two notches to be cut. Time to go flip the burgers.
Old Sneelock here again. Thanks for watching. Have you subscribed yet? If you enjoyed the video, please take a moment and click the thumbs up.